Hello there, people of the internet. How's everyone doing today? I'm doing alright, thanks for asking. You'll have to forgive the background noise. My range is right next to an active construction site right now. There's nothing I can do about it, especially with the time schedules that I'm on. So we are going to have a little bit of noise in the background. You'll have to bear with that. That being said, I was drunk the other night, and this is where all of my greatest stories come from. Start off with, I was drunk the other night, right? I think that's the case with a lot of us, but I was drunk the other night and I was talking to a buddy of mine, and we were coming up with video ideas as we do. But I was talking to my buddy about how I wanted to do something to where I could fire all of my guns. And he said, well, why don't you start doing a video series talking about the guns that you actually have, like specifically the firearms that I actually own. So I looked at him and I said, that is a great idea. I think I gave him a peanut for his valiant service. True story. Anyway, the beauty about being a military surplus collector as I am, unfortunately I did not make it to where the surplus was, quite cheap. I got at the very end of that run. But the surplus, very expensive nowadays. It's now officially collectible stuff. But I still managed to find my way to owning a bunch of military surplus. And the beauty about military surplus is you have decades, sometimes even centuries of development and history behind them. So hey, I can make some pretty interesting content with some of the rifles that I have, and I think that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. So this right here is the start of the video series. To start it off, I'm sure it's no surprise because you guys have seen the title to this video. I'm going to be talking about the different kinds of Enfield rifles that I own. I only own 2 of them for now. More coming later. But more specifically, this right here is my number 4 Mark I. It's got a Mark II sight on it, but it is a Mark I. You know it's a Mark I because it has the bolt release, that is the spring lever right here on the side versus the cut and the rail that you would use to remove the bolt on a Mark II. Now there's so much to say about these rifles that I don't even know where to start, so I guess I'll just start where these things started. Back during the Second World War, Britain was not doing so well economically, especially during the beginning of the war, as one, would expect. But the rifle that they had at the time was the number 1 that they had in service since the First World War. Well, the number 1 was a particularly fancy rifle, to say the least. And what Britain needed was a way to make a cheaper rifle, but they also still managed to make a couple of upgrades with this rifle, specifically the sights and their ease of manufacture with their sights. Now, even with the easier manufacturing sights of the number 4 series, they still had a lot of trouble with that, so for a little while during the war, they just gave it a little flip-up aperture sight in the rear, 300 and 600 meters. One of those two, I'm pretty sure with Britain it's going to be meters. But eventually they standardized on a bent sheet metal rear sight that had an aperture that went out to 1,300 meters, I believe. They also made a bunch of changes to the receiver itself. It's not just a copy of the number 1's receiver. This receiver right here is particularly easier to manufacture. Specifically, the stripper clip guide itself is milled directly onto the receiver itself versus being a separate piece like it was in the number 1 series. I got a Mark I. No, number 1, Mark III. The nomenclature of these rifles is difficult to constantly verbalize. Anyway, the number 4, after its manufacture in the Second World War, it became the Britain's normal rifle, their standard issue rifle, and they ended up issuing a ton of them to all sorts of troops. The number 4 actually remains in service to this day with Canadian forces up there in Canada, our northern brethren, who are probably going through one hell of a cold spill right now while I'm making this video. However, I'm sure the rifle is still in use in a number of other places that are perhaps second world, third world countries where people don't exactly have the manufacturing options that we have in a lot of these first world countries. Now, during and after World War II, countries began to see, understand, and realize that they didn't have to stick with the long, like traditionally long, heavy military infantry rifles that they had for, you know, decades, centuries before that. Traditionally, before smokeless powder, rifles had to be nice and long because the barrel length of a black powdered rifle matters significantly more than it does with a smokeless powder rifle. Not only that, but whenever they had single shots and muzzle loaders, they would line up ranks of men, and you wanted a nice long rifle to make sure that you don't shoot the back of the head of the man in front of you. So, probably a good thing that they had nice long rifles. And that tradition kind of carried over with the smokeless powder rifles. During World War I, whenever we witnessed trench warfare, people began to realize having this huge, you know, length rifle probably is not the best option to have, especially because most of the fighting was taking place in close quarter combat. Now, after the First World War, there was a lot of countries that were crippled, and a lot of economies never recovered from that war whenever they entered World War II. That's why we see a lot of instances in World War II where countries are using the same technology they were using in the First World War. However, technology began to change during the Second World War as things progressed. The Germans especially. I don't believe it was during the Second World War, but sometime around there, they ended up swapping over to their shorter carbiner rifles versus the nice long Gewehr rifles that they were using. I've got a phone call from Colorado. Who the hell's calling me from Colorado? It's not a damn thing in Colorado that I want. Although the show South Park is pretty good. But I don't know if they are actually in Colorado. Anyway, where was I? Countries were realizing that shorter rifles were much handier and they weren't losing a whole lot of velocity. The Germans realized it, the Russians realized it, eventually the United States realized it, they adopted the M1 carbine, but that wasn't really intended to be the standard infantry rifle. There was more of a PDW rifle. Anyway, I digress. Britain eventually realized this as well after the Second World War. They ended up developing what would become the number 5 rifle. Now this right here is not an actual number 5. This right here is a Santa Fe Jungle Carbine. This particular rifle is built off of a number 1 Mark III dated 1942. How do you like that? Number 1 Mark III Star. My bad. And as you can see, the stripper clip guide on this thing is a separate piece from the receiver. We see that here because this right here is actually the main body of a number 1, not a number 5. It's just a look-alike of a number 5. Personally, I think that this is the best of both worlds because I have both a number 5 because it looks like a number 5, and I have a number 1 because it's actually a number 1. Some people would argue that that is the worst of both worlds, but hey, goddammit, let me have my fun and enjoy myself. Now, I cannot vouch for an actual number 5 because I've never actually used one in person. I've seen one, I've held one, I've felt it, but I've never actually fired it out on the range. From what I can tell, it is a very nice little rifle. However, this right here is also a very nice little rifle. The number 1s were quite decent little rifles. However, my one main concern about the Santa Fe conversion is this pot metal flash hider. It is very nice to have because it does work really well, but I'm not certain how stable it is. Like I said, it's just cast metal and it's only glued on. There's no rivets, no screws, you know, it's not tightened on in any way, it's just glued on. From the 60s. Yeah. But it hasn't blown up yet, it hasn't come off yet, so I'm still alive, I still have my face. But eventually the British would end up adopting this before they ended up moving on to their semi-automatic rifle. And then just like pretty much every other military at that time, their standard issue bolt action rifles became a thing of the past. Slowly, progressively, but they did in fact become a thing of the past. Eventually, a lot of these rifles were sold as surplus, and a lot of them got chopped up in either sporterization or in this particular case, making a number 5. Alright, now let me talk about one of the things that I hate about these rifles. Yes, there is something that I absolutely despise about these rifles, and that is the stripper clips. Anyone who has ever used a surplus Enfield stripper clip, 303 Enfield stripper clip, Now, keyword there is surplus. There's some reproductions that are actually quite nice, but anyone who's ever used a surplus one where it's got like the anodized finish on it, man, it is just gritty and hard to use. You got to like put your full-on body weight into that thing to make it work, and I hate it so much. Now, I did have a buddy who, I'm not sure if he made it himself or if he got it from someone else, but he actually had a couple of these that were stainless steel, like a polished stainless steel, and those worked so well. They were so smooth. The spring tension on them was just right. I could push them in with a finger, but I could hold them out like this and shake them all around and they wouldn't go anywhere. Those were some nice clips. But your surplus ones, absolutely awful. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that the strap that I have on my number 4 right here is just an aftermarket strap. This is not the strap that they were using. And by aftermarket strap, I mean I took one of my old guitar straps, cut it off, tied it on, and now it serves as a strap. I got dozens of these. I'm also a guitar collector, but that's not what this channel is about. Speaking of this channel, it wouldn't be much of a gun channel if I didn't at least lob a little bit of lead. Now, ammunition right now in the United States, we're at the ass end of 2020. It is still very, very difficult to find. And whenever you do find it, it is quite expensive. So I'm not going to be expending a whole lot of ammunition here simply because I have other videos I'd like to make in the future. Now, while I load this thing, I'm going to go ahead and use my number 4 because my Jungle Carbine lookalike over there, the rear sight on it kind of impedes on where you would normally load in your stripper clips. You gotta like move it out of the way, and I feel like explaining all of that to you guys is much easier than actually moving it out of the way. So let me see here, how does this load in? That one would be first. Okay, now comes the fun part of trying to finagle, there we go, those in there. Alright, that wasn't as bad as I was expecting. I did oil this thing before we get started though. So, now that I got 5 rounds in this thing, we're going to go ahead and lob some lead. I've just got a steel target down there. Who doesn't like the ring of lead hitting steel, right? I know I love it. Now, the steel target, we're only at about 50 yards, so ricochets are a thing. I do have it facing in that direction, so we don't really have to worry about any rounds coming back and hitting me in the ass. Face maybe, but not ass. Alright, let's go ahead. The steel target is currently at the rim of that car. I do like these rifles, the longer rifles, because of the weight that they have. The recoil on them is so nice, and the way that the bolt is a cock-on-close action, you don't have that resistance of the bolt cocking itself as you open it up like you do on a Mauser. As a result, you can run these things quite quickly. Oof. Whenever they are in working order, of course. The magazine on this particular infield kind of sucks. Alright, let's keep her going. Missed both rounds. Another thing that I dislike about not necessarily these rifles, but the sights they were using at the time, these are sighted out to 300 yards. That means I'm hitting quite high. I have to aim significantly under the target at 50 yards. And that is the battle sight. 300 yard mark. There's nothing that I can do about that. Now I could back up to some further distances, which is probably what we'll do after I fire my other rifle. And that should make getting hits on target a little bit easier. Now, if you're using this in combat, like in the 1940s, and you had an actual person standing there, it's all right. You're allowed to not have to aim to the point of being right on target. Boy, oh boy, did I butcher that sentence. If you aim center mass on that fucker, you're probably gonna hit him somewhere, and that's what matters. Alright, now, it does look like my steel target did fall down a bit, so I'm gonna go re-angle that just to make sure I don't get hit by any unnecessary ricochets. Alright, I went through the agony of having to reload this thing These are annoying as hell to load, simply because it's a rimmed cartridge. You have to make sure that your top rim is in front of the one underneath it, and you got to make sure the ones down there as you go down further and further are the same way, otherwise you're gonna suffer from rim lock. And rim lock is one of those things that we don't like on these rifles, or any rifle in particular. Now you see, my rear sight is right in the way. This right here doesn't have the original #1 sights on it. Actually, I guess this sight would be original on this thing, simply because it's from 1942. I'm not sure if they were... Actually, no. No, I'm pretty sure that Santa Fe stuck their rear sight in the middle of the stripper clip guide itself. So, that right there can't be the original rear sight. I'm not sure why they wouldn't just keep the #1 sight on it. Not sure. Anyway, it's California. What else can you say about that? We're gonna go ahead, cram our stripper clip guide into this thing after having moved our sights out of the way. Such an annoying process. Agonizing process. You know, this stripper clip right here really is not that bad. It's not great, mind you, but like, it's better than a Mosin's stripper clip, by far, like significantly. Alright, now we got 5 rounds loaded up. Hold on, let me move my phone to this pocket. There we go. We got 5 rounds loaded up now. I have to put the sights back where they were. Oh god. I'm being overly dramatic for those of you that don't catch on to my sarcasm. 5 rounds, let's go ahead, lob some lead down range. This little carbine is actually quite nice, especially with the rubber butt pad and the horrifying muzzle brake on it. Quite comfortable. Well, I guess it'd be a flash hider versus a muzzle brake. But who really cares? It's just nomenclature, right? I'm sure there's nobody on the internet that actually, you know, gives such important emphasis on making sure that people say the right thing. My sarcasm is at an all-time high today. I should just stop. Stop what I'm doing before I piss off someone, because I guarantee I'm going to piss off someone. Talk about what I'm talking about. This is a very nice little carbine. I love it. It doesn't really happen whenever you fire, but one of the things I like about the cocking on close action is that whenever you open it up, it kind of opens itself up. And it's really cool. Now, another little tidbit of information if you don't like dry firing your guns. This right here works on basically everything besides the Arisaka, like Mausers, Mosins, Enfields, all their counterparts. As you're closing the gun, if you hold down the trigger, you can actually comfortably close it in a way that drops the firing pin without actually forcibly dry firing the gun. Alright, now, just for fun, we're going to go ahead, step out to, I'd say about 100 yards, lob some more lead down range. I got like another 5 rounds with me, just because that's what I grabbed. And then we'll end the video properly. Alright, we're out here at a bit of a fair distance now. I went ahead and I loaded these rounds individually versus loading them into the stripper clip, because I'm out here to have fun, and nothing is fun about loading that stripper clip. Alright, so yeah, about 100 yards or so. This right here does have a 300-yard sight on it, so I still have to aim a little low. However, I should be able to make it happen. Ah, I hit that one. That's one of the reasons why I like this gun so much. If I ever travel or go on some sort of extended hunting trip to where I'm going to be walking around a lot, this right here is a nice, accurate little gun. It's also quite light, very comfortable. The ammunition for it is something that I can find. It is powerful and sufficient enough to handle anything that I would come across, for the most part. Might take a couple of rounds to bring down a bear, but those things are hard to bring down. can't believe how comfortable this rifle is. How accurate it is, too. There for a good long while, I had some real trouble hitting targets out at any sort of significant distance. I know 100 yards isn't that significant, but that's about as far as I can see with my eyesight anyway, so unless I'm having optic. But growing up, I had a really worn out, shot to hell, surplus, like poor grade surplus Mosin Nagant. I still have it. It's not great. Definitely not great. And the trigger on it, very literally, is like trying to drag a grand piano over a gravel road. It's just awful. Genuinely awful. But I used to think that I was stupidly inaccurate just because that trigger was so bad. And then I got myself something that had an actually decent trigger on it. Like this Jungle Carbine conversion, the trigger on it is fantastic. It's got a little bit of creep, but then you hit that sear and you can very firmly feel it, and then you break it, and it's a very nice trigger, especially compared to the Mosins. I can't remember what I got after I had gotten the Mosin. It wasn't an AK-47 because I had another military surplus rifle before that. Not only that, but the AK's trigger is also not great. I believe it was my Turkish Mauser that I got, where I figured out that trigger control and the quality of a trigger definitely directly impacts how accurate you are. Anyway, I'm just going off on a personal tangent here. I apologize about that. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like this kind of stuff, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because I do this kind of stuff, as you can see from the car down there. This is a regular occurrence for me. If you actually like the video, do me a solid and like the video. YouTube's kind of anti-gun right now. Every like, every subscribe, every share, these help me grow the channel, which is something that YouTube does not want me to do. Go ahead and check out the description down below. You're going to find a link to my Patreon, my Discord. You're going to find a link to my second channel. It's a channel where I just get drunk and play video games. If YouTube or something gets rid of this channel, if the anti-gun algorithm pushes itself through and this channel goes bye-bye, then that's going to be my fallback channel. If you want to support, you'll definitely support by subscribing to that one as well. Alright, well, this was fun, but I am on a timetable, but I also want to continue to shoot stuff. I just don't have any more time, at least not right now. Alright, I guess I'll put up the guns. Well, I mean, ammo is expensive right now anyway, so my capacity for firing my weapons is not quite what I'd like it to be. Not quite what I'd like it to be at all. But I think that's the case with every gun-toting American right now, so I'm gonna go take care of what I have to do with the rest of the day. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. Thanks for watching. Yada yada yada. Typical YouTube outro stuff. Bye. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. Shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.